Allow me to introduce our next speaker, Santee Frazier. He is a member of the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma and the author of Dark 30 and Arum, two collections of poetry that look truthfully at Native American identity and its survival amidst today's culture. He received a BFA from the Institute of American Indian Arts and an MFA from Syracuse University. Frazier's writing has awarded him the Fall 2009 Lenon Residency Fellowship and the 2001 Truman Capote Scholarship from the Institute of American Indian Arts Creative Writing Program. Currently, he's the director of the Institute of American Indian Arts Low Residency MFA program. While he takes time to read some of his work for us today, reflect on the emotion he infuses his text with, and feel the vulnerability he puts on display as a glimpse into Native American life. Here's Santee Frazier.
Oh, thanks, Caden, for that introduction. And I'd also like to thank the other readers. Sure, video readings can be an inconvenience, but I've got to experience so much more than I would have, going to live readings and conferences, doing things this way. So many more writers that I've been exposed to, and I'm grateful for that. I would like to thank, Clemson University for allowing for this particular space. And I'm delighted to read tonight. I kind of do something a little bit different with my readings because I'm really into the visual elements of poetry writing, form, shape, also typography and design, those things. And so, poetry in terms of a literary form is the closest you can get to a sort of a visual, two-dimensional, three-dimensional art. So I like to read from a slide deck. And in that presentation, I will have all of the poems as they appear in the book and on the screen. So I'm going to share my screen here. And once I get into the world of the reading, I kind of don't give a lot of context on the poems. You'll kind of get the idea here. But the first couple of slides are mostly introductory, just kind of introducing you to the world from which I write. And I don't think it's a world that's necessarily, I don't know, in terms of a native indigenous world, I don't think it's one that's often transmitted in literature or has been. And I think that that's one of the things, one of the challenges as a poet is, how do I do something different? How do I create a experience on the page, craft an experience as a poet, but then also how does my experience as a native indigenous person inform that as well? And so the book itself is called Arum, which is Latin for gold. And I like this particular word mainly because it's shaped almost kind of like an accordion. And then also this particular color appears throughout the collection. And then I have 3 new poems that I think offer a different sound register than the other poems. And you'll see whenever I start reading that, I look for a specific, sonic profiles in the poems. Sometimes they echo, sometimes they're out of tune, and then sometimes I'll try to make pleasing music in the ear. But I'm first and foremost a poet of sound, I think. Sound, and then to a lesser extent, image. So this is these images appear in the book. So this is the title page after you go from the cover. And this is a custom image that I worked with this artist, Jameson Chase Banks. He's Seneca Cayuga Nation. And we collaborated on this image together. Let me go back here, sorry. And you'll see that he drew this in steps, and I wanted him to take photographs of this image in steps as he kind of went along until the image was complete. Because, right, it's not just an accordion, but this is also how the language works in the poems, right? So when the accordion spreads out, right, so does the language also in this poem. And some of the lines in the poems are also out of tune, so on and so forth. And then you'll also hear this, hear the accordion referenced. And so we worked on this image together to kind of add to extend, right, the visual language of the world that I'm writing in. I worked with two other artists. They're also native. Monty Little, he's from the Navajo Nation. He does these amazing prints and sort of this more sort of abstract type of work. Mostly set in the Southwest. You can see that from the shadows that a lot of the figures make and things like that. But these images appear toward the latter parts of the book. But I think it again it speaks to the type of line, stanza, those types of things that I'm operating in. And then this other is Micah Wesley, who's a Muskogee Kiowa Nation. He's currently based in Oklahoma. I grew up with Micah, and he kind of does this sort of Americana type of work, but also, work, I feel like, set in about, 1950s and 60s Oklahoma in some cases, right? Just that particular type of figure, that type of dress, that kind of thing. And so I've been working with him for quite a while. He did the cover for my first book, Dark 30. So all of these artists are Institute of American Indian Arts alumni. And so I feel like we're kind of all representing a particular aesthetic that comes from from that school. So the book starts out with an epigraph from Eduardo Galeano's Open Veins of Latin America. The nobodies, nobody's children, owners of nothing, the nobodies, the no ones, the nobodied, running like rabbits, dying through life, screwed in every which way. Sanguinaria, a bullwhip, handle wrapped with duct tape, the ends knotted to halt the unweaving, a revolver and a bandana, a fillet knife, K-bar, and a pair of brass knuckles, flecks of blood in the dents. Every Friday after work, he parked the T-Bird underneath the shade. I remember my toes gripping the limbs, watching as he unwrapped the pistol, cocked the hammer, squeezed the trigger, loaded the shells. I remember the wind dusting up the hillside, bending maple and oak, trailer windows latching shut. He liked the quiet of a ditch, the snap of skull crushing into smaller snaps, the way skin flays off the collarbone. Taught to gnaw, to take a switch across the arches, a worming sort whose armpits smell like mustard, strike behind his ear, forearms lashed and etched, a bulbous fist strung with muscle, nose misshapen, fungal curds over a frown ribbed and chapped, nubbin that sounds like clavicle, hawked, a slurry of vice, a tally of kin, a breath or smother that utters moth wings sat to kindling, from a world stricken with slog and all manners of knifing, a scuttle of arm, a smattering of ochre between the chomps and fangs, torquing his wrists from shackle, a culling of melanin, his skull ensconced in choir song, a tail of wiry locks, hank of charred skin. So I've been writing this serial poem about a character named Mangled Creekbed for about 15 years now, I guess. It's been a while. I've been a poet that long. It's hard to believe sometimes. And he first appeared in Dark 30, and sort of he was meant as, as a character, he was meant as a spoof to or a critique on the life a Native American male, visibly Native male, could lead in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And so a lot of his poems are set in that time period. And also, Mangled is also an instrument of sound. So when I began writing these poems, they were initially started out as prose poems, these little small prose blocks that I would write. I just really liked the way that that sounded in the ear, right? Mangled like a tin can in the ditch, you know. So I was just writing over and over again, those phrases. And oddly enough, it came from influence from novelist Mary Caponegro, one of my old teachers at SU, and she helped me begin to develop this. And then I've continued writing these poems since then. So Mangled is a character, but also a sound. Mangled liked to spin the chickens, liked how they danced headless in the dirt, unable to cluck, flapping their wings in the tin shack. He ate lunch outside the chicken house, white plume stuck in his taco hat, eating boiled eggs and wild onions. He smelt like livers, like chicken head, his skin dark as a plum. And as he roamed the pasture, he saw the demon on cinder blocks, windows busted out, the hood propped up, dirt dauber nest in the muffler. Mangled thought of tanks, of spark plugs and pistons, and the crunch of steel. Mangled reckoned at the bugs streaming up the fence post, shine of their bodies that crunched between his fingers and teeth. He sat and looked upon the tilled pasture, tilted his hat, and slept and dreamt. Twice ruined. Mangled does not remember the beating outside the tavern, just that when he woke, the air under the rumbling bridge smelt like hot engine oil, like tire. His twice ruined face inflated, cheeks and hair crusted with muddy earth, boots spackled with blood. Crouched near a creek, he saw his face, wavy in the ripple, slit eyes buried under swollen flesh. He thought of the knife, its baptism, flicker of sunlight on the current, blade hidden behind the rust. As Mangled dipped his face in the water, he saw the creek bed, minnows darting along the moss-covered stones. Bit of a reference to Louise Erdrich, The Baptism of the Knife. She has a wonderful book of poetry, Baptism of Desire. I think as a poet, she's underrated. Most everyone knows her from prose writing, but if you ever get a chance, you should read her poems. And also a sort of a reference to Theodore Roethke, just that sound of his poems. I was listening to him. There's a recording that I have of Theodore Roethke reading, and I just love the sound of his voice, and I would listen and write poems to it. So Half-Life is a book that takes up the second half of Arum. It's one long poem. And as you can see from the title, Half-Life there, the hyphen there appears, or the dash appears, throughout the poems. And that just, so it's a sequence really, but all these little poems are linked together by an M dash. So when you see the poems on the slide here in the book, they're actually isolated on the page by themselves. But I think it's kind of fun to see the poems and the typography and the form, so on and so forth, kind of in one, in one screen or one slide. So it's just sort of these cascading images. In this poem, I was trying to release all the narrative elements, storytelling elements from the language, and try to strip the poems as much as possible to only the essential words that the poem needs to function. Half-life. In your grip, a lighter, thumb and flint, sparking to flame, blankets ablaze, the muted fire of fabric. They leap a puddle, dome-bellied, sticky with pop, plum dark feet and ankles. Cranium crammed through the windshield, T-bird bottomed out in a ditch, dash still lit, a school of cans scattered across the seat. You see morning sun yellow in splintered wood paneling, brass hands of a clock blistering like rust, pinto beans, salt meat melted into the juice, cornbread, mustard, yellowing the mash, hand-shaped meat, sliced, fried in bacon grease. Through almond-shaped mask holes, pulsating lips wet with snoring, shirt off, jeans unbuttoned, work boot for pillow, gashed knuckles, burn scar shaped like a three-pronged fork on the round of his shoulder, cheeks cratered, nose shiny, fungal. School of cans, ashtray-spired orange. It is Halloween. The trailer house lit dim blue. Outside, leaves scatter. Applause. Through almond-shaped mask holes, you see a dim-lit bathroom. Small hexagon tiles, black and white, patterned to shape a walkway. The stalls boxed and beamed wood. On your tippy toes, neck outstretched, you see projected on the mirror, scribbled on a paper plate, crosshatch of a screech owl's face tied to your head with fishing twine. With your finger, find where crayon meets paper, eye holes cut jagged with a razor blade. On your knees, swiveling on a stool, scan your face in the neck of a whiskey bottle, glowing in the amber. It is Easter, your kin clacking billiards, gulping down pickled eggs and beer. You stand at a pinball machine, mashing the flippers, the deep ding of steel, the ball slicking its way across the plastic, a carnival in a box, like the sound of bees popping in a paper bag. Projected on the back glass, your face and dollies lit up like gospel, hoot and stomp, echo in the tavern, the juke bright against the cinder block, the forget it, blinking, pink, neon. The grain makes everything smell fried. Trains all night, stopping at the silos. This is industry. This is sleep. The crust in your eyes as you sing to the dew-slick dandelions. It is a bowl of beans smashed with mustard. You're peeling a scab from your elbow, jeans holing at the knee. The bus bobs your head against the glass, your face dissolving against the diesels convoying out of town. This is the afterworld, the hoisting of feed sacks into the truck bed, sawing of ribs in the slaughterhouse, snuff spit in a coffee can. This is where you will be, jeans holing at the knee. This is not fate, the textbook says. In this version of the tale, you are to be crucified or burned. Rotors twisted wood to shreds. You stare at the tip of a pencil, light a mirror on sharpened lead. Outside the dusty town, the yonder is burnt orange, sun still gnawing at the stars. This is not fate, the textbook says. In this version of the tale, you ate the glacier. Horses did not survive the bridge. You are the slide on the wall, model of the human skeleton. Outside the dusty town, the yonder is burnt orange, sun still gnawing at the stars. This is not fate, the textbook says. Your village was razed, grunts smothered, children left to twirl legless in the scorched corn. And so, as you can see from that, the last few sections of that poem, sort of my indictment on the American public school system and how it treats Native history and Native existence in textbooks. And so, one of the things that in these last few lines here, the grunts smothered, children left to twirl legless in the scorched corn, is a direct reference to the Sullivan campaign. Right after America became a country, after the Revolution, George Washington ordered General Sullivan to burn all the crops that were grown by nations from the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. So that's the Onondaga Nation, Mohawk Nation, so on and so forth. I live here just outside of Syracuse, New York, just near the Onondaga Nation. So Sullivan was successful in his campaign. He burnt down all the corn, the crops that they had. And that particular year, there was a 17-year cicada, and they came up from the ground. And if you've ever heard them, they sound like a beeping, like you're getting a hearing test. It's like that all summer. But the cicada ended up becoming a delicacy up here because that's what folks ate, due to the fact that the U.S. Army had burnt all of their food. So that image is sort of related to that. I don't put a lot of history and code it inside of there. I try to let the language speak for itself. But I think it's really important to kind of note where some of these images sort of come from and through my readings and research. So these final few poems, and they're smaller, they're a different sound register and they're also a different expression. So each book, each set of poems, I try to do something completely different. And so you'll kind of hear the difference in the line and also the sort of the intention of the poems. Lachrymose. The slow crawling light wilts into the dark crags of asphalt. The moon rings the dim lit room. The scraping, the fire, dust in the deep flesh of ear. Strike a match and watch the flame, the scraping, the fire ring in unison. The brain's bent fugue. Yoked mica, deafened glint, scrape and fire, the moon ringing the dim lit room. A louse in a crevice of brain, wrinklescape and knuckles flexed, lashed, etched around the steel, the affliction of squalor, a pummeling, skull and brain smelted, starless. Pavement roars the thin dark to dawn, the softest of dreads. In the brain's dark, the metal noise of work wanes, and I wince in the quiet as beltings and welts shape themselves into the jejune gray sunna, the slightest of umbrage tracing the edges of verse rung of linity. I uncork the amber and swill. My neck slumps and nod to excise misbelief as headlights beam the length of a bridge, where below the stream is high, the current swirling, bugs not yet buzzing the thicket. The day begins in blur and racket, the whine of diesels, the grunt of gears, a void of wrenches and pistons, and I stare until the drizzle becomes rain and the rain clicks. So this is the final poem. A white light spalls through the drab, curtains beige and stiff. Outside, limbs, ground, aglow. A lean of snow carved by a dim wind. Tires hiss the wet asphalt. In pining for the slow hum of gears, a rumble in the cavern of ear, low hung limbs vain distance. Pump jacks gnaw at dirt. A dreary run of hours, the brush bending, dustless. Light and sound shaping the blackness. Sometimes distance is a malady fraught with undazzling clank, as to skim slick misty bark or hum a tune of rot. I envy dreams that cleave well-bred spoils of woe, that vector ache, and rifle the banal into dusks ornamented with kindling, as to argufy small oblivions, cold and speared by ochreish glint. So those are some of my poems. I think it's, again, to see the language, to see the form of the letters, the form of the stanzas, and those things are important. And, when we're in an auditorium together, you can't really see those things. And, it's all, it's all, you have to pay attention to everything in the ear. And I think that poems, are visual. And so I'm, completely humbled to get to share my, my little world with you, and my poems and, language and this creative space. Thank you.